Let's discuss some most commons. Okay, so retinoblastoma is a tumor of childhood. Pediatric age group e দেখা যায় retinoblastoma. Okay, so pediatric age group e আর কি tumor দেখা যায়, and I will start by questioning you people. Okay, so what is the most common malignancy in pediatric age group? Just say anything comes to your mind. I know you know the answer. এই তো পেছন থেকে তুমি বলছো, বলো। আরে ট্রাই করো, গেস করো, ইটস নট অ্যান এক্সাম। You with the spectacles, you are looking at me directly. Guess, just make a guess. Can't make a guess? Anyone can make a guess? আমরা সব সময় দেখছি। Okay, it's a blood cancer. I am giving you a hint. ALL, exactly, you are right. So leukemia is the most common type of primary malignancy in children, and in all the leukemia, the most common type is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Okay, see, you guys already know these things. All you have to do is gather up some courage and answer. Okay, the next question from my end will be, what is the most common solid tumor in pediatric age group? Leukemia is not a solid tumor, it is a blood cancer. So what is the most common solid tumor? Any idea? Okay, I will answer it for you. It is a primary CNS tumor or brain tumor. Okay, so brain tumor or primary CNS tumor is the most common type of solid tumor in pediatric age group, and among that, pilocytic astrocytoma is the most common type. Now, third question is, what is the most, now this is brain tumor is an intracranial tumor. So the next question comes, what is the most common extracranial tumor in pediatric age? Exactly, neuroblastoma. She's right. Neuroblastoma is the most common extracranial tumor in pediatric age group. And mind you, all these questions are very important MCQ questions for your PG, and these are very high topics. Now the fourth question is, what is the most common intraocular tumor in pediatric age group? And yes, you know the answer, that is today's topic, retinoblastoma. So just going through it once again. Most common primary malignancy in children, leukemia. The most common type is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Then comes most common solid tumor in children, primary CNS tumor. The most common type is pilocytic astrocytoma. The most common extracranial solid tumor is neuroblastoma, and the most common intraocular solid tumor is retinoblastoma. Okay, now coming to retinoblastoma, it is, as I already said, most common intraocular tumor in children, and the incidence. Okay, so it is found in children of 1 to 2, or according to some sources 1 to 3 years age. So it can be found at birth as well, but if not found at birth, it will be most commonly found in children of 1 to 3 years age, and approximately 60% of the cases will be bilateral, will be unilateral, and the rest 40% will be bilateral. Now another tumor which is commonly found with retinoblastoma is pinealoblastoma, and whenever pinealoblastoma is found in association with bilateral retinoblastoma, together, all three entities together, they are often termed as trilateral retinoblastoma, because two retinoblastoma on both sides and pinealoblastoma placed centrally. So it is called trilateral retinoblastoma. Now coming to the pathogenesis. You all know the gene responsible for retinoblastoma is the RB gene, and it is located on chromosome number 13q14. Now, whenever coming to retinoblastoma, we have two types genetically. From the point of genetic inheritance, we have two types, that is the hereditary retinoblastoma and then the sporadic retinoblastoma. Now, in your genetics chapter, you have come across this concept of hypothesis, that is the two-hit hypothesis, Knutson's two-hit hypothesis. This is a very important question, and this becomes very relevant in this topic. Why? Because we all know that according to Knutson's two-hit hypothesis, for any genetic disease to have its manifestation in a patient, two hits have to be there. So there has to be a first hit and a second hit. So what happens in case of retinoblastoma? In case of the hereditary retinoblastoma, first hit is germline mutation in the RB gene. So we all know that like all the genes, RB gene is also having two alleles. So the first hit will be germline mutation in a single allele of this RB gene. And in case of hereditary retinoblastoma, the second hit will be a somatic mutation in the second allele of the RB gene. So together with these two hits, we are getting the hereditary retinoblastoma. Now what happens in case of sporadic case? So the term sporadic means that there is no genetic predisposition and there is no germ cell mutation. So the hits are random, the somatic mutations are random. So in this case, both the alleles of the RB gene will have somatic hit, somatic mutation. So both the hits will be a somatic mutation. Now the third important point is, whenever we are having the hereditary retinoblastoma, it is mostly presenting as bilateral tumor. So a few points on the RB gene. So RB gene decodes the RB protein in our body and it is known as the governor of cell proliferation. So why are we designating it as the governor? Why are we giving this huge position called the governor? So basically in cell cycle there are many phases. There are G1 phase, G2 phase, S phase. So all these phases have a checkpoint. Okay. So from G1 to S there is a checkpoint and this checkpoint is being strictly monitored by this RB gene and the RB protein. So coming to the protein, the RB protein is a tumor suppressive pocket protein. Now why are we calling it a pocket protein? Because it is basically pocketing a very important transcription factor, that is the E2F transcription factor, as you all can see in this diagram. So this triangular thing is the E2F transcription factor and this thing outside is the RB protein. Now in its hypophosphorylated state, so hypophosphorylated state, the P's are the phosphate groups. So in hypophosphorylated state, less P's are there. So it is basically covering, encasing the E2F factor. It is kind of capturing it and preventing it from doing its function. Okay. So if the E2F transcription factor is captured and stopped, what will happen? Transcription arrest will be there. There will be no transcription, and transcription is a very important step in cell cycle progression. So since there is no transcription, there will be no progression from the G1 to the S cycle. So what happens in the hyperphosphorylated state? We are seeing that this RB protein is releasing the E2F transcription factor. So once the E2F transcription factor is released, transcription goes on and then the progression will be there. So it is a very important protein, and whenever the alleles are hit by either germline or somatic mutation, the manifestation will be as retinoblastoma. Okay, now coming to the clinical features. Now a child comes to you with some difficulty in vision, some loss of vision or blurred vision. The child can come to you with pain or swelling in eye. What will you do? Okay, you have not done your eye ophthalmology posting yet, but in your ophthalmology posting you will know that whenever you are getting a patient with some visual abnormality, the first thing you do is shine a torch light, okay, into the eye of the patient. Okay, so you are shining a torch light into the eye and you are getting a white pupillary reflex or leukocoria. What is leukocoria? White pupillary reflex. What is it? It means that whenever we are shining torchlight inside the pupil of a eye of the patient, we are getting this grayish or whitish color. Normally the color is reddish, But in case of leukocoria, the color will be whitish or grayish. Look at this picture. So look at the left eye of this kid. What is the color of the pupil? It is not supposed to be white like that, but it is white, and that is called the white pupillary reflex or leukocoria, and it is the most important, most common clinical presentation of retinoblastoma. Okay, so after leukocoria, along with it we can also see strabismus or squint. Okay, that is misalignment of the eyeballs. So strabismus will be there. So these are the most important clinical features. After that, we can also have pain, redness, swelling. We can also have some mass, but it will be seen in a later stage. Other than the pain, redness, we can have some changes in vision, and the changes in vision can range from some blurred vision to loss of vision. And whenever the retinoblastoma, which is supposed to be an intraocular tumor, whenever it goes outside the eyeball and occupies the orbital cavity, okay, it presents as a orbital mass. So in a patient, if not treated well or not taken care of, can present at a later stage with a ocular mass. Now the gross features. The retinoblastoma as a tumor, it can be flat, it can also be diffuse and elevated, and certain cases we are also having multicentric, multinodular growths. Okay, so grossly there can be two types, the endophytic type and the exophytic type. The endophytic type, as the name suggests, the tumor grows inside the eyeball. Okay, so the retinoblastoma is arising from the retinal cells. The retina is at the posterior part, at the posterior wall of the eyeball. So if it grows inwards, it has to go into the vitreous chamber. So the endophytic tumor will grow inside the vitreous chamber, and the exophytic tumor will grow outside the retina, in between the retina and the pigment layer. And then grossly, we are also having extensive necrosis in the tumor, and in these areas of necrosis, there will be local calcium deposition. And this calcium deposition becomes a very important diagnostic factor, because if you are doing an orbital X-ray or if you are doing an orbital USG, we can identify this calcium deposition as white deposits. Okay, so this is the gross picture of, basically this is seen in, this is a black and white picture, and here we can see the endophytic type of retinoblastoma. So this is the retina. The tumor is arising from here. This is the posterior wall of the eyeball, and this is the vitreous chamber. So endophytic tumor growing inside the eyeball, inside the vitreous chamber, and it can also lead to vitreous seeding. Now coming to the microscopic feature, which is the most important part of this discussion. So here we are seeing small round blue cells, masses of small round blue cells, which will be arranged in sheets or groups or nests, and they can also be arranged in rosettes. Along with that, as I already told you in the gross, we are having areas of necrosis. So in these areas of necrosis, there will be areas of calcium deposition and also hematoxylic DNA deposition. Now, as I already mentioned the term rosette. So in small round blue cell tumor and in different types of neuroendocrine tumor, rosettes are seen. Okay. And in case of retinoblastoma, we are seeing both Homer-Wright rosette and the Flexner-Winter-Steiner rosette. So what are the difference? These are heavy names and we have to know what they look like. So this is the Homer-Wright pseudorosette and this is the Flexner-Winter-Steiner rosette. Now, whenever we are talking about rosette, there is a true rosette and there is a pseudo rosette. Do anyone of you have any clue of what is a true rosette and what can be a pseudo rosette? Okay, so yeah, sit down. So you are right. So in a true rosette, there is a lumen. Okay, that lumen is the characteristic finding of a true rosette. In case of pseudo rosette, that lumen will not be there. Instead of that, there will be that eosinophilic area known as neuropil. Now here we can see these are the true rosette. These are the Flexner Wintersteiner rosette. Inside, if you are looking closely, you can see that inside the pink there are these white round areas. So these are the lumen. So in a true rosette, this lumen, just like a lumen we see inside a blood vessel, just like that a lumen is here. So in true rosette, we are seeing this lumen. In case of pseudo rosette, there is no lumen. The cells are arranged in that fashion that it looks like a rosette, but there is actually no true lumen in the center part of it, and it is filled with eosinophilic material. So whenever there is no lumen, we are calling it a pseudo rosette. So this is the Homarite rosette and it is a pseudo rosette. And remember, both type of rosettes are seen in case of retinoblastoma. Okay, now again this is a gross picture of retinoblastoma. You can see this is a multinodular tumor and it is almost occupying whole of the vitreous chamber. So this is the anterior part of the eye, this is the cornea, this is the conjunctiva, this is the anterior chamber, this is the posterior chamber, the vitreous chamber, and this is the retina. Tumor is arising from here, the retina occupying the vitreous chamber. Now on microscopy, we can see that there are vast areas of necrosis. These pinkish areas, these are areas of necrosis, and here with the black arrow, this dark purple deposition, this dark purple amorphous deposition, these are the calcium deposit. Okay. So calcium deposits are often seen in areas of necrosis. Now coming to the cellular part, so these are the small round blue cells. This is low power. I will also show you the high power. Now the small round blue cells are forming these rosette-like structures. These are the Flexner Wintersteiner rosette. Okay. So on higher power, here if you look closely, you can identify both the rosettes. This is a true rosette because this has a lumen inside it. So this is the Flexner Wintersteiner rosette, and this is the Homarite rosette. There is no lumen inside it, only eosinophilic material. This is the Homarite rosette. Okay. Now coming to the spread and metastasis, it can invade the optic nerve and it can also go to the brain, carried through the cerebrospinal fluid, and if a tumor is large and exophytic, it can present with secondary glaucoma and it has highest risk of invasion. Now, the tumor can also invade the uveal tract and a massive choroidal invasion can be there and it can present with hematogenous metastasis. I already told you while discussing the endophytic type that vitreous seeding can be there in the vitreous chamber, and whenever it is there, it is a poor prognostic factor. Now, distant metastasis can be seen and it can be limited inside the cranial vault, inside the cranium, or it can go further away and go to the skeletal bones. Now, coming to prognosis. Now, certain poor prognostic factors are there and these are important from MCQ point of view. The poor prognostic factors are, so whenever there are optic nerve invasion, it is a poor prognostic factor. Whenever there is invasion of the choroid, it is a poor prognostic factor. Another poor prognostic factor is vitreous seeding. And finally, we see that in a child with retinoblastoma, there is often development of a secondary malignancy. Okay. So, since there is a genetic mutation happening in this child is predisposed to further malignancies. Now, among these malignancies, the most common are osteosarcoma and rhabdomyosarcoma. So, whenever a child with a retinoblastoma presents with another second malignancy like osteosarcoma or rhabdomyosarcoma, definitely it becomes a poor prognosis case. Okay, and the final point is MYCN amplification. It is a poor prognostic factor. Now, there are multiple treatment modalities currently. So, if there is a small anterior tumor, it can be treated with systemic chemoreduction, which is followed by consolidation using cryotherapy. Okay. Now, in case of posterior chamber tumor, there can be thermotherapy or laser photocoagulation. Then, if the tumors are larger and forming plaque in the retina, we can go for plaque radiation or brachytherapy. And whenever the tumors are very large or recurrent in their occurrence, we have to go for enucleation. That is the radical therapy. That concludes our first topic, retinoblastoma. Now, in my last class on adrenal tumors, due to lack of time, I could not finish the neuroblastoma part. So today I will cover that, and since both are of neural origin, you will find that there are many similarities and many overlapping areas in both of these tumors. So what are neuroblastoma? So they are basically tumors that arising from the sympathetic chain and also from the adrenal gland, the adrenal medulla. Okay, and the cells of origin in case of neuroblastoma I already discussed in my last class. These are the primordial neural crest cells. Okay. Now, in case of these neural tumors, we are seeing a spectrum, and this spectrum will include neuroblastoma, ganglioneuroma, and ganglioneuroblastoma. Okay. Among all these entities, neuroblastoma is the most common. Okay, so as I already told you that it is the most common extracranial solid tumor in case of children, and the average age of diagnosis is 18 months, and 40% cases will occur in infancy. Now, though most of the cases are sporadic, some can be familial with genetic predisposition. So, in the familial cases, there will be genetic mutation in the alkaline anaplastic lymphoma kinase or the ALK gene. Okay. So, this is what you have to remember, the ALK anaplastic lymphoma kinase gene, and there will be a somatic gain of function mutation in this particular gene. Okay. Now, morphologically, most of these neuroblastoma, almost 40% of them will arise in the adrenal medulla, and they can occur in any part of the sympathetic chain as well, but it is less common. And when it comes to sympathetic chain, it is occurring in the paravertebral part of the abdomen and posterior mediastinum, and these tumors can also be seen in the pelvis, neck, and brain region. Okay. Now, coming to the size, it can be very small in case of in situ lesion, and it can grow large and weigh up to 1 kg. Okay. Now, some of these neuroblastomas can have a fibrous pseudocapsule, but some are more infiltrative. So, the in situ lesions are never infiltrative, but whenever the lesions are larger, they can be encapsulated small, and if they are growing larger, they can invade the surrounding structures like since if they are present in the adrenal medulla or inside the abdomen, the surrounding structures are what? The surrounding structures are the kidney, because the adrenal gland is sitting just on top of kidney, and then it can spread into the vena cava and also the renal vein and the abdominal aorta. Okay. Now, on cut section, these tumors are composed of the soft grey tan tissue, and in case of larger tumors, there can be areas of hemorrhage, necrosis, and cystic changes. Along with that, there can also be foci of calcification. We also saw it in retinoblastoma that along with necrosis, there is foci of dystrophic calcification. Here also we can see that. Okay, now the gross picture. Here we can see that on left, the tumor has this variegated appearance, which is resulting from hemorrhage and necrosis, and on the right, we can see that this tumor is located on the kidney. Now, in a child, whenever tumor is located suprarenally or just on top of the kidney, we have to suspect neuroblastoma since it is the most common extracranial tumor in case of pediatric age group. Now coming to the microscopy. Now if you remember the microscopy of retinoblastoma which I just discussed, it will be very easy for you to remember the microscopy of neuroblastoma because it is again composed of that same small round blue cells, okay, and these cells are primitive appearing, and just like in case of retinoblastoma, these cells are having very scant cytoplasm, and that is why they are having a high NC ratio, okay. Now along with this, these cells can be seen in solid sheets and they can also form rosettes. Now talking about rosettes, in retinoblastoma we saw both types of rosettes, that is the Homer-Wright pseudorosette and the Flexner-Wintersteiner rosette. Now what type of rosette we will see in neuroblastoma? Okay, in case of neuroblastoma, we will only see the Homer-Wright pseudorosette. So that is an important point of differentiation. In neuroblastoma, you don't see both type of rosette, you only see Homer-Wright pseudorosette. Okay, so along with this, you can see there are increased mitotic activities and karyorrhexis will be there, and if the tumors are high grade, these mitotic activities will be higher. In the background of the tumor, there will be this eosinophilic material which is known as neuropil. Okay, so this is the microscopic picture of neuroblastoma. It is a high power magnification, and here you can see we saw similar picture in retinoblastoma, and here we are again seeing these small round blue cells, and the matrix is a fine fibrillary matrix, and here in the center, the center is eosinophilic and there is no central lumen. So this is a pseudorosette and this is a Homer-Wright pseudorosette. Okay. Now this is the classification of neuroblastoma. You don't need to know this in detail, but just for some idea. So the neuroblastoma can be broadly classified into neuroblastoma, ganglioneuroblastoma, ganglioneuroma. Okay, now how is this classification happening? So as we go from top to bottom of this table, there is increased differentiation. So the entities on the top of this table, that is the neuroblastoma, they are the least differentiated among all of these, and ganglioneuroma is the most differentiated, and with increased differentiation the prognosis improves. So the tumors on the top are having bad prognosis and the tumors on the bottom are having good prognosis. Now what is determining this differentiation? It is the presence of Swannian stroma. Okay. Now first have a look at this picture. So in this picture we can see this fibrillary eosinophilic stroma. So this is called a Swannian stroma, and these are clusters of cells. These are the ganglion cells. I will come to this picture later again, but just for your understanding, so this is called a Swannian stroma. So whenever in a neuroblastic stroma, the neuroblastic tumor, the amount of this Swannian stroma increases, it is going towards differentiation and it is going towards ganglioneuroma, which is the most differentiated form of this tumor. Coming back to this table, so you can see that in case of neuroblastoma, there will be no Swannian stroma in case of undifferentiated form. In case of poorly differentiated form, stroma will be there but less than 5%, and in case of the differentiating neuroblastoma, there will be more than 5% of Swannian stroma. Now whenever the Swannian stroma is becoming more than 50%, we are calling it ganglioneuroblastoma. Okay, and then whenever the Swannian stroma is even more, so it is predominant element of the tumor and only scattered ganglion cells are there, then we are calling it ganglioneuroma. you don't need to go in further detail, you don't need to know in further detail, but for your understanding you can go through this table once again. Okay, now just to compare with, I just showed you this picture of neuroblastoma. Here you could clearly see the formation of rosettes. Now this is a differentiating neuroblastoma. Now here, this is also a case of neuroblastoma, but here you cannot see the rosettes because this is not a differentiating neuroblastoma, this is an undifferentiated neuroblastoma. So the small round blue cells are there, but they are not forming any kind of rosette. And this is a picture of ganglioneuroma where you can see these ganglion cells. Okay, so they are present in clusters, and the predominant element of the tumor is the Swannian stroma, and it is surrounding these ganglion cells. And there is absence of neuropil, and there is also absence of neuroblastic cells, that is the small round blue cells. So that's why this is a ganglioneuroma. Okay, now coming to the clinical features, they usually present with abdominal masses, fever and weight loss. So a child present with abdominal mass, fever and weight loss, and if there is metastasis, then they can produce and present with symptoms like bone pain, pathological fracture, and if metastasizing to the lung, they can present with respiratory symptoms and also gastrointestinal complaints. Now metastasis can occur widely, and the tumor can metastasize to liver, lung, bone and bone marrow. Now another important region, location for metastasis is the periorbital region. So periorbital region, if the neuroblastoma is metastasizing in the periorbital region, patient will present with proptosis, that is the eyeball is coming out, and it will also present with ecchymosis. Okay, now in certain conditions, neuroblastoma can be disseminated all over the body of the patient, and they can cause multiple cutaneous metastasis in the patient. So whenever this happens, it presents with small blue dots. The cutaneous metastasis of neuroblastoma will present like that, and it is called blueberry muffin baby. Okay. Now lab diagnosis, this is common with the other adrenal medullary tumors. So even in pheochromocytoma, we saw that we have to check the levels of vanillyl mandelic acid and homovanillic acid in urine, because these are the metabolites of catecholamine. So since this tumor is arising from the adrenal medulla, there will be increased catecholamine secretion and increased catecholamine metabolites in the urine. Now about 90% cases of neuroblastoma, regardless of the location, will produce catecholamine. Even if it is not in the adrenal medulla, it will produce catecholamine. And hypertension, what we saw in pheochromocytoma, hypertension was a chief clinical complaint, but in case of neuroblastoma, hypertension is less common. Okay, now coming to some MCQs. Okay, I have 15 MCQs for you, whether to see whether you have paid any attention to the class. So the first question is, the most characteristic presenting feature of retinoblastoma. Anyone? C, right, it is C, it is leukocoria. Okay, and the RB1 is located on A, right, 13q14 chromosome. Which of the following is characteristic of retinoblastoma on histopathology? C, majority is going for C, and you are right, both types of rosette are seen. Which additional malignancy is classically associated with retinoblastoma? Some are saying B, some are saying C. Okay, the correct answer is B, pinealoblastoma, and it will be called as trilateral retinoblastoma if pinealoblastoma is there with a bilateral retinoblastoma. Okay, now The flexner intestinal rosette is characterized by I discussed it in detail. B, yes. Central lumen-like space. So the lumen has to be there that differentiates a true rosette from a pseudo rosette. Okay. Which of the following is characteristic radiological finding in retinoblastoma? In radiology, what we will find? Yes, calcification is seen in the tumor. Children with hereditary retinoblastoma have an increased risk of developing A. How many are guessing A? Raise your hands. I heard A from that side. I guess you people said A, no? It is A. The correct answer is A. Very good. It is osteosarcoma. Okay. Which of the following is not a true rosette? Very easy. Homer-Wright rosette. Yes. And which of the following is not a typical feature of neuroblastoma? Only one feature I have not mentioned. So that is not a typical feature. See, we are seeing neuropil there, we are seeing Homer-Wright rosettes, and we are also seeing ganglion cells. The only thing we are not seeing is the cross striation. So it is not a feature. Which of the following findings is associated with a favorable prognosis in neuroblastoma? I have mentioned it in my discussion. If you have paid any attention, you will know. It is the high degree of tumor differentiation. That's why I was showing you the table, that further downward you go in the table, differentiation increases. So a ganglioneuroma will have best prognosis. Disseminated neuroblastoma, what will be the presenting feature? A, yes, very good. Blueberry muffin skin lesions. Which genetic alteration is particularly associated with aggressive neuroblastoma and poor prognosis? Come on, I discussed this already, you know it. Key answer? A to. C. Samoma bodies, can you see Samoma bodies in neuroblastoma? Samoma body, where do we see Samoma body? We are seeing Samoma body in many tumors. Name one tumor where we can see that. One tumor. Any idea? It is seen in papillary thyroid carcinoma, right? Okay. That is the most important thing for your, it is important for your level. There are other tumors but not important for your level. Okay, so here the answer is Homer-Wright rosette, because flexner intestinal rosette is not seen in neuroblastoma, and you have to remember it. That is the key difference between retinoblastoma and neuroblastoma. A tumor composed predominantly of mature ganglion cells with abundant Swannian stroma is most consistent with not A. A is not the answer. The answer is C, ganglioneuroma. Here we are seeing abundant Swannian stroma. In case of neuroblastoma, Swannian stroma will not be there. It will be predominantly composed of primitive small round blue cells. This is the last question. A child with adrenal neuroblastoma has markedly elevated urinary VMA and HVA. Metabolites of catecholamine, right? B. Okay, very good.